we want to attract people to this field. You've just got the demand of the students that need the services continues to increase. And yet the professionals that need to, are able to provide those services aren't keeping up.
I'd like to welcome everyone here to the second episode of Homeroom, brought to you by EduStaff. Today, I have the honor of being joined by Jennifer Martin. Jennifer, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, JP. How are you?
I am quite well, thank you. So today we have you here to talk about special education staffing. Why don't you give us a little introduction to your role here at EduStaff and how you got into special education?
Absolutely. I love talking about special education, so I could do this all day, every day. So thank you for inviting me to talk about this.
My pleasure.
So I am a speech-language pathologist and have been for about 20 years now. I worked primarily with Spanish-speaking children and their families. I'm bilingual. That's just an area that I love. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely been a really cool career, really cool in so many ways. And did that for a long time and worked in multiple settings, but always with children. A lot of that time was in schools. And again, it was just a great joy. It was always just something I never regretted doing. And now I have the privilege of working here at EduStaff and helping support our partner school districts that have needs in special education professionals. And how do we build these partnerships and programs with these districts in an area that it's hard, it's challenging. And so I'm here to help partner with districts and to be able to provide additional support as we already are in the education space with short-term, really looking at more long-term and really concentrated on special education in this space.
Yeah, that's excellent. So when you mentioned that area is hard to staff these individuals, why don't you give some of the audience a 10,000-foot view of what makes it so difficult and what are some of the issues that districts are facing when it comes to staffing special education positions?
Yeah, absolutely. There's many factors that go into this. And I think, COVID didn't help in a lot of ways. And education, I think it was just the straw that broke the camel's back for a lot of our educators. And I don't blame them. It was a really hard time for everybody. And when you're in charge of a whole classroom of students that way, that's just adds another layer of difficulty.
I can imagine, yeah.
So that's definitely a factor. And I think there's just looking in the world of special education, there's more students qualifying than exiting from services. And the severities, the numbers, there's just a lot more students that are qualifying for special education. And within that group, those needs are just greater. A lot more behavior, a lot more, processing challenges, and, just a lot of autism. There's just a lot of things that really are making it where a lot more kids are on IEPs.
So there's more demand on the system.
For sure. Like. And in order to exit a student that no longer qualifies, that takes time and energy. And when you don't have the workforce and the time to do that, then those students just keep getting pushed along. So has there been anything that's changed that increase? Like, I don't want to get too into regulations and stuff, but for there to be an increase in demand, has anything changed? Like, did they expand what qualifies to enter the program or? No. So that's actually been, the qualifications, how you get in, really for the most part has been the same for years and years and years. It's just, with the way our world's evolving, there's just a lot more incidents of students that need that additional support. And I also think, there probably were several even just, back in the day that were missed or, we didn't know what we didn't know. And so now we do. And we want to support everybody that needs that support. So there's just a lot more awareness and knowledge about what students that need extra support looks like. And so in a lot of these, before it's like, oh, well, they just have a behavior problem. They're not paying attention. Well, there's underlying things that were causing those that were just being dismissed as just a behavior issue. But now we know, oh no, it is more of a special education situation where they, the behavior is a secondary piece,
Right.
not really addressing what
It's a result of something
correct.
else.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, having more students that need the services, and it's also hard because there's just not as many people going to school for special education teachers. A lot of our special education providers, the programs, they graduate really small cohorts. You look at your school psychologist, and some of those graduating classes are under 20.
Wow.
And so, you've just got the demand of the students that need the services continues to increase. And yet the professionals that need to, are able to provide those services aren't keeping up.
Right. Your supply to meet that demand, they're moving in opposite directions.
Exactly. And the other piece too is some of these positions, it's challenging because, a lot of them, they require a master's degree. And so that's a financial burden that you have to take on, and you have to get into graduate school. And then you have to be able to take that time to, continue to be in school and not making an income, but have those student loan debts. So there's a lot of barriers at times to entry to these positions. So that makes it challenging as well to get people that want to come in and pursue this work.
So with that lack of being able to meet that demand, what are the effects that districts would face when they have these shortages?
Yeah, and I've lived this, and anybody who's a special educator or works in a school is like, yep. Is what happens is, you don't have the people in the buildings to provide the supports that are needed, and yet, the supports needed are more. There's just more students that need the services. The services that they need are intensified, and there's less people to provide those. So then what happens is, those students then are oftentimes ones that just keep getting pushed through because there's just not enough support.
And that's not doing a service to the students.
Correct. Yeah. And it also, what it does is, for example, when I was at one district, they said, oh, you'll only have a caseload of this many kids. I said, okay, but it almost doubled. And there was nobody to help take on some of those students. So they legally needed to be seen. So then I was stretched so thin that there were times where I was like, is what I'm doing even effective? Because
is there no limit on the amount of students that can be placed into a classroom? Because I know sometimes you have a paraprofessional in the classroom with you. Is there no limits based on, could you have 20 students, 30 students? Are there any limits based on state regulations or anything there? Or?
Yeah, so I mean, that depends. Like if you have, a center-based program, or whether it's, a resource room for special education students, I mean, those typically need to be a manageable size. And, some have 2 teachers and then 2 paraprofessionals, depending on the needs of the students. So, you may have a gen ed classroom that has, 30 kids and 1 teacher. And then you may have one of these classrooms that has 15 students, but 4 individuals are needed for that.
Wow.
And
I can see the demand getting high when those are
exactly
the types of requirements you're going to need.
Yeah. And as far as, some of our related services for, speech pathologists, school psychologists, there are some states that have caseload caps that are enforced, but really for the most part, it's a suggested level. But like in my instance, the students keep qualifying. Like they don't stop throughout the year. So if there's nobody else to pick up those pieces, then it's on that person to provide those services.
But that would have to take a toll on teachers, no? And that's probably part of maybe why people aren't going into these programs. Or have you seen a higher percentage of your cohorts who might get burnt out and pursue other options? Like, what does that kind of look like? Where does that piece fit in?
Yeah. No, that is a huge piece, JP. It's you start to feel like what you went to school to do and where your passion really lies, because you don't go into this for fame and fortune. You really have to have a heart for it. And what happens is sometimes you can't do your job, or you don't feel like you can do it well because The other piece too with special education that I don't think a lot of people realize is that there's time spent with the student, but we have so much paperwork and administrative responsibilities as well. In fact, I would say during my time in the schools, half of my week was devoted, depending on the week.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to go to school to do paperwork.
To do more paperwork.
Yeah. Of course, it's an expectation that is going to be part of your job, but when it becomes most of your job and you feel like what you really wanted to do, you're not able to do as well. And when you are doing it, you don't feel as effective because you've got large groups. You're not able to really focus on what you need to. It starts to chip away at you and just take some of that joy of why you wanted to do that job in the first place.
Yeah, that's a hard balance to find.
Yes.
So we've talked about what isn't working.
Mm-hmm.
In cases where districts might not be seeing shortages, what do you see for the districts where things are working correctly?
Yeah, there's a few key things. One is pay. People want to be compensated for what they're doing. And that's everybody in education. So the districts that have been able to increase that pay scale and compensate people in a way that they feel like, oh, I can live on this.
Right.
That's definitely a big one. The other ones are, again, having a balance and having support from the administrators and people in the building where it's a cohesive group and people support one another, and you have sounding board, you have your support and your community within the school, but also that you're heard when it's like, I can't physically take on anything else. Like I'm busting at the seams. Okay, let's be proactive and let's figure out how we can support you with that. Because instead of, well, I'm sorry, you're the only one here, you're going to have to take that. And so I think it's really, feeling supported, feeling heard, being able to do your job what you went to school for, why you're doing that, and being able to really focus on that and do that versus all the other noise. And pay. So I'd say community and compensation are kind of your big ones.
So for a district that is struggling, if you could kind of build a to-do list of things to focus on, you have pay, and then obviously listening to your teachers. What would that to-do list kind of look like? Yeah,
I think along with that, second one, mentorship goes a long way. There's something to be said for, especially when you're newer in the field, and it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming when you're seasoned sometimes. And so, we want to attract people to this field. And what happens, and I feel like is happening, is that there's so much negative press around it that it's almost, I think, scares people away. Like, oh, I maybe would have been interested in that, but I only hear negative things.
Right.
So I think if we built in some systems of mentorship, what's like some career growth opportunities to know that, hey, you can come in as this, and then here are pathways so that some people may not want to move up and they're like, I'm perfectly happy doing this. But for those that do,
that's nice to know that opportunity is there.
Yes, exactly. It seems small, but it's so big, is just feeling appreciated. And, what does that look like? It's, oftentimes there's the joke like, it's a terrible year, but you get a pizza party at the end of the year. And so it's like, oh, it's all better.
Yeah.
But it's, really showing up and having people feel appreciated, whether that's, you go drink a cup of coffee and take a break, during your planning period, and I'll help do this. Or we're going to have a luncheon where, you all are pampered, but it's more ongoing versus, once a year, twice a year, when everybody's already completely burnt out.
Right.
And I think the other thing too is, I think this is changing some, but oftentimes, in education, there's this feeling of, well, I got to stay for hours after the day ends because otherwise I'll never get anything done. And if people are doing that because they truly can't get everything done, and then that's burning them out, then and they don't have that work-life balance, then that is going to be a big issue too. So how do you help protect that work-life balance for your staff and advocate for that? So that, because I remember sometimes feeling like, even though it was time for me, I could leave, there's still more than half the cars in the parking lot. So I would oftentimes feel like, well, I guess I need to stay too because everybody else is staying. Sure. And so I think just helping to create a culture of balance and, and again, I know that's easier said than done, but.
Well, you need time to unplug, right?
Yes.
It's not an easy job.
No.
And a lot of positions you're going to be feeling burned out. So to be able to unplug and kind of leave work at work for a little bit, especially when you've already stayed late. So I could see that. Everybody needs that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things like every once in a while, or if I'm doing something on a weekend, but it's just, that shouldn't be happening every day and every weekend. So it's like, what's the problem?
Right.
If somebody physically can't get their job responsibilities done, what can we do to help? And I know it has been interesting too within, kind of going back to what districts have done to be successful, is that I know some districts, what they're doing is bringing in support staff that help take some of that administrative burden off of the special ed staff so that.
And this will be like the paperwork that.
Correct. Okay. Yes. Or for example, it might be, a special education teacher that does all the testing, report writing and everything so that the other special education teacher can work with the students. And so those types of things go a long way.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Having somebody that can just help with some of that administrative burden is huge.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So we've looked at what the issues are and what's working for districts. As we are a staffing company, what are some options even through EduStaff that, people might be able to look forward to and take advantage of?
I always say to districts, and I mean this, and, if you never need us, I'm cheering with you. Like, I want you to be able to staff all your positions. That I say that from my heart. If you do need us, I want us to be the best insurance policy you've ever had. And so one of the things that was so exciting about joining EduStaff is that I have been able to build this with our districts for our districts. So I did not come in here saying, well, I'm going to go to them and tell them this is what we're offering and how we're doing it. Like, here it is.
Sure.
I wanted to hear their voices. What do you need? What does this look like? You're in it. What does that look like? How can we be the best partner? Yeah. And it was so interesting because so many of them, that's the first time anybody had asked them.
Which is crazy when you think about supporting people, right?
Yes. It's like, I have this, audience of people that can tell me what to do and how to do it. Yeah. Like, I'm going to take advantage of that. And that has been a blast. And I have loved every second of it. And it's just been so enlightening to have a better understanding of what does it look like and how different it looks, even within the same state, different states. But really working with them to build this and be a value add. I don't ever want to approach this as, well, you need these people and we can find them. So here you go, take it or leave it. I look at this as you're trusting us to fill these hard to fill positions that are working with some of your most vulnerable students. These need to be quality people. They need to be a huge value add and a part of your school district that is, you think, how would I live without this person? And then just from a company perspective, EduStaff is known for being a really great partner to educators, listening. If you need something, you call. You're not getting the runaround. You've got those dedicated people that are your partner, your point of contact. And we want this to be the exact same thing, is that, you aren't going to have to make 5 phone calls to handle one thing. That's our job. You make one call, we handle it. And we're also doing something a little bit different in that we're working with key states and key disciplines because we really are valuing quality over quantity and want to do this well and want to do this right. And by really being able to laser focused on some of these states and disciplines, we're going to just get better and better and better. And then that'll be when it's time to expand more. But really right now we want to do this thoughtfully and well, because we value our partnerships with these districts, and I don't ever take that for granted.
That's incredible. And it's something I'm certainly looking forward to, is being able to provide that support that so many districts have needed.
Yeah.
One of the last questions that I want to ask people here is, throughout your educational career, who is one person that has made an impact or changed your life?
So, gosh, so many. However, there's one that ties in really well to what we're talking about today. So when I was in high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. If, in college, what I want to study, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't even know what I want to have for breakfast today.
Right.
So, and my mom had worked in special education. So I was, familiar with many of the roles and fields, but I was never one of those that, oh, if my mom did it, I'm just going to do it too. I just really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And Mrs. Underwood, it was my junior year, and she stopped me after class and she said, I don't know what you're thinking of doing after high school, but I just have to tell you that I think you would be an amazing speech pathologist. Have you ever heard of that? And I said, well, yeah, I've heard of it. My mom's special ed. And she said, I just feel like you would be really good at that. So then I was like, talking to my mom about it. And I said, do you think I could go and just shadow somebody in one of your schools? And she said, yeah. So I went and did that. And I was like, this is really cool. So I, went to undergrad and just loved it. I was never, ever tempted once to switch majors. It was like, this is it. I mean, I started
calling.
Yes. And so this is the interesting finale of this story. For years, I have thought, I need to tell her that what she said to me that day set my professional trajectory. And so it just bothered me. I'd think about it and I'd forget. And then finally one day I was like, I'm doing it. So I found an address that was linked to her and wrote her this handwritten letter that was just explaining to her, thank you so much for saying that to me. Yeah. I've had this amazing career, and, just really expressing my gratitude, and gave my email address. And sure enough, she emailed me back and she said, Jennifer, this is the kind of note that every educator dreams of getting. And
Absolutely.
So I was so glad that I did that. And she said, I wonder what made me say that to you that day. That's so interesting. And so anyway, I would say they would definitely be Mrs. Underwood.
That is incredible. And it just goes to show in education, the impact that all of us can have. And we may not know it right now.
Yes.
But the fact that just on a whim, she, ended you up here working as a SLP and special education, is you just have no idea what changes you could make on a student in the blink of an eye.
Like literally, I think about, she said one sentence to me.
Yeah.
And it's been this amazing path that I could have never dreamed of. So
and that's why it's so important that we help get these classrooms filled, because you truly are making a difference when you are inside of a classroom and out.
Well, I hope. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I have so much respect for educators, because it's a hard job, and but a rewarding one.
Absolutely. So. Well, Jennifer, I appreciate you for joining us here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And hopefully we'll have you back soon.
All right, I'll do it.
All right, take care.
You too.